Leveling Up Nation, this is Brigham Black. I'm so grateful to host another awesome episode of Leveling Up with you guys. I've got a wonderful guest. Her name is Dr. Eileen Gallagher. We are good friends from the Final Percent Network. So thankful to have her. She is a vitality expert. And we're going to be talking about how often we think of healthcare, but the reality is it's sick care. And we're going to be talking about how we find success stories and figuring out what do we need to do to prevent illness rather than just cure sickness. So grateful to have you on today. And where you're a vitality expert, I am so stoked to hear a little bit of your insights. You've got a very great career in the health industry. And I just want to say welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Well, Eileen, tell us a little bit. Why do people need to listen to you? Because I mean, you've got a wealth of experience. Give them a little bit of a sneak peek of why it's so important to really focus on your health, because that's intrinsically tied to your wealth.
Yeah, so I'll give a little bit of my background so you can understand why I'm at least somewhat credible. My undergrad degree was in nutrition science, and then I became a dietitian. So my focus and approach to healthcare, if you want to say healthcare, has always been from a preventative aspect. And then I worked in the nutrition industry, if you will. I was working in the hospital systems in San Francisco while I was applying to medical school. And then I went to medical school at University of California, Irvine. And my specialty area was family medicine, and then did residency training up at Oregon Health Sciences University in Portland, Oregon. And then have transitioned into being a family practice doc for 15 years in clinical practice. And then the last few years I've been doing more coaching around health and wellness, becoming a vitality expert. I did a lot of kind of a deep dive into longevity medicine / functional medicine / biohacking. And I've done a lot of work in kind of corporate wellness, looking also at population health. So my background is varied, although most of it as a physician has focused on getting to the root of the problem, rather than looking at, here's a Band-Aid for the problem.
Yeah, I think that's so good to really figure out what's the cause, and you have to dig a little deeper. You have to think a lot harder than just saying, well, this will cover up the bleeding and this will stop the bleeding time.
Right. Well, and I think so often when people are in the middle of a for lack of better words, kind of crisis, they want a solution for the crisis at the time. However, really the better solution, in my opinion, is to really look at why are we in the crisis mode and what can we do to prevent crisis from happening again.
So good. So when we were in Wyoming together, you said this phrase, hey, it's not healthcare, it's sick care. And it stuck with me and it resonated. And I was like, tell us why you say that, because you've got a wealth of experience in healthcare. And I think that really is something that might come off as hard to hear for some doctors, but let's hear your take on it.
Yeah. So if you look at, it's not always sick care. There's a lot of people who come in for wellness exams. I think, especially when you're going in with kids, it's preventive for getting vaccines and making sure that they're growing well on the growth curves. I think most of the time, though, especially in urgent care and ER, our healthcare delivery is really when people are in crisis. They're having a heart attack, they're having a stroke, they broke a limb, they have a sickness, whether it's COVID or a sinus infection or strep throat or whatever. So they're coming in at a time when they're sick. Even with adults in primary care, a lot of the reason why they're coming in is because they have something going on as well, that they have a problem that they want to address, not that they're coming in to say, let's talk about how I keep myself well and prevent myself from getting sick. And so I think most of the time when people are going to the doctor, unless they're going in for a preventive visit, which even then a lot of times they're coming in with their preventive list and their sick list that they want to address at the visit. So I think I would refer to it as sick care because people are coming in when something is starting to go wrong or is already wrong, rather than looking at how do I keep myself in a really healthy place to keep myself from needing to go to the doctor. And I think the ideal would be that medical care delivery, which is relatively broken right now, will shift a little bit more to a place where we do focus on wellness and we do focus on, here's the things that you can do to keep yourself from meeting someone like me. Or in the ways of being sick, but rather here's the ways that I can give you tools, and really partnering with patients, I think, instead of a lot of the, I don't know if I want to say the traditional way or old way of medicine is people coming in and their doctor telling them what to do. And my approach is let's partner together and figure out, what do you want to do and what are you willing to do?
Ooh, yeah.
In order to make shifts to keep yourself healthier, because I can tell people all day long what to do, but if it's not something they want to do or not something they're going to do, it's wasted breath. And so for me, it's really looking at a collaborative partnership, which is a lot more what I've done in vitality coaching and wellness coaching, is really, what do you see as your areas of challenge? What are things that you want to work on? And what are simple things that we can do to make pretty significant shifts to help you have a sort of healthier approach to lifestyle and your health overall?
I love it. And this is really coming from a preventative nature rather than a curative way. And instead of saying, hey, just do this and do this and do this, you're saying, what can we do together? How can I be a support with you rather than just telling them what to do? Because I think very few adults like to be told what to do. And most people would rather counsel together and say, hey, this is what I feel like could be helpful. Is that something you're willing? And I love that you get their permission as well. I think that's a key to salesmanship. That's a key to business. It's a key to life. If you don't have permission, that's just unwanted and unwarranted advice, So
well, I think it's one of the big things we talk about in coaching is, in order to actually be an effective coach, you do have to have permission. I think coaching was a really easy segue for me because I've basically been coaching people my whole life with being a dietitian, or my whole professional life, I should say. And then being a parent, you're coaching, but in a different way. And sometimes it's unwanted.
That's fair. That is fair.
But I think even you can do the same thing with your kids. Like if you collaborate with your children, I mean, when they're really little, you can't as much, but when kids get a say in kind of what their day looks like or what their choices are, like even with getting dressed, like sometimes I didn't have a lot of issues with this, but I know a lot of parents have had issues with kids getting dressed. And if you give them a choice, they're always much happier that they get to pick which shoes they wear or which outfit they wear. And sometimes it doesn't always go together, and that's okay. But I think the collaboration or partnership and helping people feel empowered goes a long way in helping them to be more invested in the process or the choice.
There's more buy-in and enrollment, right?
100%.
Because they are part of the decision. It's not just, I made this decision for you. Here's your medicine and take this, period. And like, well, what if there's not a medicine for that? All you need to do is adjust how much you're eating or adjust how much exercise you have. Like it's something you need to partner with them and find out how willing they are to actually take the steps.
Correct.
Because I mean, most of the time, like I remember hearing this comedian talk about how he interacted with his wife, and he was this engineer. And she's like, honey, does this make me look fat? What do I need to do to lose all this fat? And he's like, well, lower your caloric intake and increase your exercise. And she's like, oh, excuse me? And it was like, well, that's technically the right answer, but you don't say that necessarily in that way. You have to get the buy-in and figure out, well, where are you and what are you willing to do? Because not all of us have the same goals. I've been working with Devin Thau. I love this guy. He's been helping me figure out what are the things I'm willing to do. And then as I'm consistently willing to do those things, then he adds a little bit more and a little bit more. It's not, here's 50 changes you need to make, because if that would have happened, nothing would have actually changed in my life. I would have probably just gotten overwhelmed and done nothing.
Well, I think there's a comment of, it's the quote, the confused mind does nothing. I mean, even if you look at it in business, if you try to change 10, 15, 20 things, the change isn't going to be very effective because it's relatively disorganized. If you can pick, 1 to 5 things and you're like, okay, these are the things I'm going to focus on right now. And then when those become, depending upon whether they're bigger or smaller, either micro or macro habit changes, and you can implement them. And it varies depending upon which person you talk to or which study you look at. So they're somewhere between like 5 weeks and 66 days, which I think are the different kind of time amounts that people say it takes to really implement a habit. And so when you get those small micro habits, typically they're more micro habits like drinking more water or cutting out juice or, doing less fats or adding in more protein or whatever, if you're looking at dietary changes. Once you get a couple of them nailed down, then you can move to the next one and to the next one. And a lot of it's about documenting and recording so that the habits you're paying attention to them initially, and then they become so routine you don't really have to pay attention to them.
Well, I love that. I was teaching a lesson yesterday for my little 15-year-old kids that I teach in church, and we went through the 4 levels of learning, and I thought it was really interesting. I'm actually, just because I'm talking about it, I actually might go grab this little slide because I thought it was really great. I'm gonna find this for you guys, because the 4 levels of learning, it was something that they had never heard, and I've heard it so often that I forget that it's kind of a sweet concept. So I'm going to share it really quick with you guys, and something that we even brought up in Wyoming once. So I'll pull this up and I'm going to hit share. Give me one second.
Yeah.
All right. Great. Slides, not slides. It has to be share screen. Okay. I'm going to learn. Okay. Teachify. There it is. Okay. So check this out. There's 4 levels of learning. You start out as, unconscious incompetent, and then you go to consciously incompetent. And then after you've figured out, I really don't know what I'm doing, you start working at it, working at the skills, and then eventually you get to consciously competent. And then you go to unconsciously competent. And another way to think about this is, at the beginning, sometimes you think you know what you're doing, and you're like, I know this is just the way it's supposed to go. I get this. I understand it. And I'm going to hit this so it's a little larger on the present full screen. Present. There you go. Okay. So you have the wrong intuition. That's really that first level. You're like, I thought I knew what I needed to do. Think of like a teenager making most dumb choices. They have this intuition like, well, I should be doing this. And you're like, well, you had the wrong intuition.
Not knowing what you don't know.
Not knowing what you don't know. And then you start analyzing things. You're like, well, I think this is the way it should be. And from all my life experience, this is the way it should be. And then your analysis is wrong. And that's consciously incompetent. You realize, I analyzed this and it was very, very wrong. And then after you work at it, you're around the right people, you start making different shifts in your life. Then you go to consciously competent. And it takes effort to make sure that you're analyzing this correctly. And then eventually you do that long enough, you can get to this unconsciously competent. That's when your intuition starts to be right. And I love the value that I gave this example of me teaching my daughter last week how to ride a bike. She had been using for pretty much the whole summer her training wheels. And last week was the week where we took off the training wheels. And I had this question, like, when do you take off your training wheels? Right. And I thought this was something that has a application in not just in business, in life and vitality. There are times where you have to take off the training wheels to be able to progress. And it's going from consciously competent, because she was really good with the training wheels. You take that off and suddenly it's almost like, I can't more. And you figured it out. It took her 2 days and now she can ride her bike without training wheels.
Which is awesome.
And it was such a rewarding experience to be behind her and like holding the seat or holding her shirt up or holding the front, just to give her different points of balance to change things. And it reminded me of the way that our brain is programmed to learn and to improve. We can learn any skill we want to. It's just, are we willing to go through those 4 levels, to go through the suck long enough to be able to kind of get good at it and then develop that unconscious intuition to be able to be competent at it. So Eileen, in your experience, what is a way that someone maybe was completely unconsciously incompetent about their health, their vitality, and you were able to take them and help educate them in a way that allowed them to start making incremental progress so that they could be consciously competent and then unconsciously competent? I want to hear a success story of someone being preventative in their health.
I mean, there's so many, and it kind of depends on where people are coming to their health journey, because there's so many people who I mean, when you look at the health industry right now, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry in terms of supplements and, protein powders and all the things that people are looking for. Some of it because they want the easy button, and some of it because they just are learning and trying to find what are the right things for them too, because it's not, we're each our own canvas. Like, it's not that everybody needs the same things. And, men and women are different. People who have different body types are different. People who have different sort of physical structures are different, because some people are really petite and other people are more muscular and strong. And so I think, and some people, what they want to be able to do to be considered healthy and successful is very different for someone who's like a bodybuilder versus someone who wants to be able to do their activities of daily living without fatiguing, or like a grandparent who wants to get down on the floor and play with their grandkids and be able to go to Disneyland or something. So there still needs to be endurance, but what that endurance looks like is different. And so I think the unconscious incompetence can be so varied because people come with different levels of experience. I think the ones that are the most exciting, and sometimes I wish I was in that place of like learning all over again, because like I was listening to this book the other day. It's called Outlive by Peter Attia. He's a physician, and he talks about all the things. He's like, yeah, first you can just cut out juice, and then you can cut out like sugar, and you can cut out like, and I was like, I wish that I could just cut those things out. I've been doing that for like 30, 40 years. But for some people, they don't even understand, and not in a don't even like in a judgment or shaming kind of way. There's a significant lack of knowledge or information about basic nutritional building blocks. So people don't know what carbohydrates and proteins and fats are in terms of the macronutrients. And then Peter Attia will even talk about alcohol being one of the macronutrients because it's higher caloric density than proteins and carbs, because proteins and carbs are both 4 calories per gram, whereas fat is 9 calories per gram, and then alcohol is 7 calories per gram. So you can't really put it in with protein fat, or with protein carbs at 4 or fat at 9. So it really kind of is its own food group. Although really, if you look at growth and development, there's no requirement for alcohol. It's become something that's very well tolerated in our environment. And a lot of people, it's something that's a big part of their lives, but it's nutritionally not really that healthy. It's just empty calories. But it's worth evaluating for a lot of people. But so if you look at true macros, it's protein, carbs, and fat. And so for some people, when you're looking at vitality, it's starting as simple as, do you even know what your food's made up of? Do you know why you need certain components of it? And for those who already know, this might be oversimplifying it, but for carbohydrates, that's what we use for energy. It breaks down into glucose. It's stored as glycogen in your muscles. And so most things that come in the form of carbohydrate, whether it's simple carb or complex carb, you use for energy. Now, if you have too much energy because you're taking in too many calories, then you store it either as glycogen. And when the glycogen storage is complete, then it gets stored as fat, unfortunately. And it's used mostly for energy. Now, protein is used mostly for building muscle, and then other components in your body. And then you have fats that are utilized for energy, but they're also used for like your myelin sheath and different components in your body, because you can't go completely fat-free. You do need a certain amount of fat for your body to function in the ways that it needs. Now, you can use protein and or fat to be then re-engineered into glucose if you need, but for someone who really just doesn't understand the building blocks, to really open their eyes and teach them about the macronutrients, teach them how amounts and what the quality of some of those are, because a calorie is not just a calorie. When you're looking at calories that are carbs, but that have fiber and that are more complex carbs, like a sweet potato versus like rice or French fries, or just fruit juice, or things that are more sugary, like candy, for example, is sugar. Right. Or a carbohydrate. So the quality that you're going to get in something like a sweet potato, where it has more complex carbs and it has fiber, is going to be a lot better than, having nerds or dots or candy that just goes to, or juice that goes straight to your bloodstream. Whereas you have to digest the sweet potato, and then it's utilized better, and it also has vitamins and minerals in it. So I think it's really teaching people some of those things. And so to see someone shift where they start to cut out lots of the sugars where they change from like, say, a whole milk to a low fat or a fat-free milk. I don't necessarily believe in all fat-free products because I think we get way more complex, and I'm not going to go into all this today, but you can start to then teach people that protein and fats are actually really helpful for feeling satiated so that you're not hungry. If people eat a lot of carbs, it actually doesn't turn on those satiety centers. And so if you eat mostly carbs, in an hour or two after eating, you're going to be hungry again. Whereas when you eat fat and protein with that carbohydrate meal, it's more slowly, the carbs are more slowly entering into your bloodstream. And as a result, you could stay so that you're not hungry for 3 to 5 hours instead of being hungry every 1 to 2 hours. So learning how to balance your macros and have a little bit of protein, carb, and fat at each meal can actually.
So this is why, if I can understand right, this is why when you eat Lucky Charms in the morning, an hour and a half later, you're like, I am starving. It's like I didn't touch any food. That's why. It's because you need to make sure you have more than just the marshmallows and the high intense sugary cereal.
Well, and that's often why people recommend having like a healthy breakfast with like eggs or like a yogurt with fruit or with nuts or oatmeal, but putting like nut butters or something with it, because the fat, protein, and carb mixed together helps you stay more satiated and full for a longer period of time. So you're not hungry in an hour or two. Whereas the simple carbs are going to go straight into your bloodstream and you're going to feel hungry pretty quick.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So in your experience, if you could say like, here's this example of one person that did this. Do you have a friend that you're like, oh, he wouldn't mind me sharing his story or her story, how they were able to make that shift from not knowing about macros and then maybe even they're just writing it down and then started to change? I know for me, I started working with Gunther Klaus about 6 months ago, just writing down what I was eating. And that was very eye-opening. Sometimes as I was writing things down, I was like, I am not going to write this down. I just put the food away because I didn't want to eat it and write it on there. And it was interesting because as you're writing it down, you're like, I'm not going to write down another cookie. I'm just not. So I just didn't eat it.
Well, and there is an element of that. I think that's why food journals and diaries are so effective for people, because if they, especially if they have someone that they're accountable to, if they have to show it to someone, it's really, they don't want someone seeing what they did. And so they've done studies, and just by, which it's hard because you can't do a double-blind randomized control trial when someone's, writing their stuff down. It's not double-blinded. But when you look at people who are recording things versus kind of what they normally do, and it'd be self-reported, but there is an element of when you're writing stuff down and somebody's going to be looking at it, that people are quote unquote better. I mean, they've done studies with people who have diabetes or people who are just using continuous glucose monitors. And for people who don't know what that is, you can put you may have seen people at the gym or in your life or even at church or wherever. It's like a little circular thing that you put on the back of your arm. Most of the time is where people put it. You can't put it other places. But it's something that we used to, for people who have diabetes or who are tracking blood sugars, they would have to poke themselves multiple times a day to test their blood sugar. So now we have these things called continuous glucose monitors, and they're pretty slick. You can actually just take your phone and you like swipe it on the glucose monitor. And now a lot of them even do it remotely, where then it gives you a running kind of track of what your glucose looks like. And what it does is it allows people to see what foods affect them more than others. And some people aren't that glucose sensitive, and some people are very glucose sensitive. But it's using a glucose monitor, because you're seeing immediate, like, oh, when I eat the cookie, my blood sugar really, or I have the juice, my blood sugar really goes up. Well, I'm not going to do that anymore. And then when you have, like, say, something with protein, carbs, and fat that's more balanced for a meal, and you don't see a sugar spike and your blood sugar stays pretty steady, it's like, oh, maybe that's better for me to eat to control my blood sugars. And not just for people with diabetes. I've worn them because I'm curious, like, what it looks like for me, and also to educate other people. And it's really fascinating how your behavior changes when you're tracking it, or someone else is watching as well.
Well, here's another example to say how that works. I heard this from a teacher when I was in high school. He's like, well, imagine that every time you drive onto any parking lot that there's a police officer, and you'll notice people will drastically change their driving. Or if you're driving on a highway and you hear that little ping on your maps that says, hey, there's a speed trap ahead, you like slow down and you're like looking, where's that police officer? and then you actually go slower, but it's just because the police officer was there that you take it off the 5 over, and you're like, now I'm going to go 2 under, and you don't get the speeding ticket.
Well,
I think that's partially why this works, is because you have the accountability, and you're like, I'm actually going to do a little bit better because someone's looking at it.
Yeah, it's a huge part, and something we talked about in the final percent too, but a huge part of it is the awareness quotient. Mm-hmm. And as you pay more attention to things, then you're more likely to shift them because you see how it impacts your results, if you will. So to answer your other question, kind of about a couple, I have so many stories I could tell you, because I've been a health coach also for really like 15 years. That I was doing at the same time as I was in my medical practice and doing some other things. And so, I've had stories where people go from, they almost lose like half their body weight from really shifting their attitude. And so it starts out with little things like understanding and learning macros. Like I had a guy, I think he was like 423 pounds, and he got down to 260 it was just over a year that he lost almost 200 pounds. And a lot of it was shifting his ideas about what was healthy food. So really learning about macros, learning about how to change micro habits. He also went from living a very sedentary life to initially just a walking routine. So he was walking several days a week, and then he went to walking every day, and then he went to walking longer distances. So it's, again, that, building on the incremental pattern or behavior change. And then when he got thinner and felt stronger just from the walking and felt more energized, he would go to the gym, and he started doing some resistance training. And so for people who are looking at kind of health, especially as we age, one of the things that's concerning is people start to lose muscle mass. And there's a couple of reasons why that happens. Some of it's just, unfortunately, the aging process. And the way to prevent that is to do resistance training. And so doing weightlifting and making sure that you're getting in enough protein, which if you don't understand macros and you don't even know what protein is, how do you keep your muscle mass? So it's really educating people on, here's the best foods to take in order to maintain what you currently have in terms of muscle mass, and then how much extra you need to actually build muscle mass. So he got stronger, leaner, thinner, and increased his longevity because his blood pressure went down, his cholesterol went down. Like overall, his entire well-being changed. That I think my favorite story from talking to he and his wife was one of those like aha behavioral shift things. And it goes to the other macro that I talked about, was with alcohol. So he and his wife loved to entertain, and they had card night once a month. And so they had several couples who would come over, and I can't remember if they played bridge or pinochle or what they were playing, but they'd play cards. And usually a lot of the focus was on what are we having for cocktails and what are we having for snacks. And so it was not necessarily the healthiest. And so he said, I realized that actually it's not about the food. It's about hanging out with our friends and having a good time and the conversation and playing cards and the whatever fellowship or camaraderie or community or whatever you want to call it. And he goes, we had vegetables with like dips and a fruit tray and, some cheese and lean meats. And we had spritzers that were just like seltzer water, or like now I would say Spindrift, but at the time, this was a few years ago, they were having Spindrift, but like seltzer waters with lime or whatever. And he goes, it didn't even matter. He's like focusing on our own health and being able to do the same activities that we're doing, but by shifting them to a way that was healthier. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things for people to keep in mind when they're looking to shift their health, because I think people feel like they're going to have FOMO or fear of missing out by changing things because they're going to get rid of things that are part of quote unquote who they are, that it feels like they're going to be missing something or losing something or having to give up something. And I think if we can shift the way that we think about it, is what are you building or creating so that your life can look more robust and have better longevity or better vitality, because you feel better. You don't wake up feeling yucky the next day. You are able to continue to manage your health goals. And so it's not about what are you giving up, but what are you gaining by making small shifts in your behaviors.
I love that. And you focus on what you're gaining. So as you're gaining better relationships, you're not worrying so much, hey, what's the treats that they're having? It's how do I ask better questions? How do I find out more about my friends? How do I make them feel more comfortable and welcome?
Right.
And I think having that shift from a treat to how do I treat my people right? Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. Well, how do you treat yourself right? Because I think for so long I think people get also caught up in, I don't know if I want to say keeping up with the Joneses, but it's like you want your friends to be comfortable in the environment that they're in. And this is what we've always done. So should we just keep doing it? And so sometimes making a big shift feels uncomfortable or awkward. But he's like, all my friends were like, oh, it's so nice to have healthier options. And I think it's just because we get into the habit or the routine of what we've been doing for a long time. And so to then shift it to something that is in alignment with your goals and desires, you find that it's actually beneficial for other people too, because there's other people that are looking to be healthier, but they don't want to complain when they come to your house for, game night or card night to say, oh, can I not have that instead?
Right. And I think you give people permission to be healthier when you make those choices. That's one of the things I really like about making better health choices is I don't have to force it on anyone, but sometimes I'll be like, oh, you made that. I'm going to actually eat that too. That sounds great. And making those little shifts. I noticed that in my daughter, she didn't used to like avocados, and I have an avocado, like half an avocado every meal basically now. Or I only do 2 meals a day, but she has a little bit of
helps with your satiety.
Yeah, it makes me feel fuller, which I enjoy. Yeah. So she's like, can I have some of that? And then the other day she's like, can I just have half of it? And I was like, here you go. And she ate half the avocado as a little 4-year-old. I was like, I'd much rather have her eat that than any type of treat. She'll feel better. She'll enjoy it because it's healthy. And I like those little micro shifts that create macro gains.
Yeah. Well, and avocados are so good. They have great fiber. They have really good different fats that you need for your body. It's good for your skin, your hair, your neurologic development. So there's avocados are like a magic food.
I love them. They're great. Well, before we sign off, one of the things I'd love to hear your opinion on is how your health and wellness, your vitality affects your business. Because I'm always adding, hey, how can I help my business owners and real estate investors that tune in? How do I help them get to that next level? How do I help them get a little bit better? What are some patterns of progress you've seen with really taking care of your health that translates into connecting more dollars into your bank account and improving your profits that way?
I mean, it's just a pretty easy corollary in my opinion. I mean, when you are feeling better, eating better, exercising more, sleeping better, because they all kind of go hand in hand, you're more rested. And so you're able to show up better in your relationships. You're able to show up better at work. You're less cloudy or foggy brained, like you're much more clear in your thought processes. So your ability to accomplish things is better. So in my opinion, when you're in a healthier state, it impacts everything in your life in positive ways. So I don't think there's one way that it makes your business better. I think everything in your business is better when you're in a healthier space.
Yeah. And I remember hearing someone bring this up that like, if in 50 years you could talk to yourself and say, hey, I've made this much money, this much wealth, you would trade all of that for your health that you have right now as a youth. They would trade all of it. So your wealth and your health are directly tied to each other. And I think it's really interesting, this concept. I don't remember who I heard it first from, but one of the people that I heard it from was Brad Lee, where he's like, hey, if I gave you $10 million today, how would you feel? He's like, what? I'd feel excited. It'd be awesome. He's like, but there's one caveat. You don't get to wake up tomorrow. You still excited about the 10 million? And they're like, oh, it's a crappy trade. I will pass. But if that's true, that you wouldn't take the 10 million, that means tomorrow is worth more than $10 million. You being able to get up out of bed, to have that health and vitality. And sometimes we don't treat our health and vitality with that much respect and honor and veneration. It's something that we want to develop, but sometimes we don't actually appreciate what we do have. And I'm so thankful for you, Eileen, for coming and sharing a few heartbeats with me, with the audience, sharing your insights and your ability to inspire and uplift. Is there any question that I didn't ask you that you wish I had so that you could share some knowledge?
I mean, I could talk forever. So I would say, especially about this, I'm really passionate about health and vitality and certainly longevity. I think to your point about your statement, there's, I think I shared it actually at Wyoming. There's a quote, and I won't say it exactly correctly, but it's the Dalai Lama basically about how you spend your youth trying to make money and build businesses, and then you spend your older years trying to buy back your health. And so if you can focus on your health in your younger years, so that when you're ready to retire, or as you're not as focused on business, and your kids are grown and out of the house often, and you have more free time, that you're in a healthy place so that you can enjoy that time. Or just create it so that my favorite quote is, build a life that you don't need a vacation from, so that your life feels like vacation. But I think the importance is, the more you can focus on your health and vitality in your younger years, and as you age, the better your quality of life will be in your later years, which then allows you to be more engaged with family, friends, and activities that you love. So I think the importance of focusing on it at any stage of your life is that it allows you to be more fully present in what you're doing.
So good. Dropping wisdom bombs, making us all want to be better and live healthier. Thank you so much, Eileen. Man,
Yeah, for sure.
Guys, it is awesome. Eileen, how do they find you online? How do they keep connected with you?
My online presence is not super fast. I mean, I'm on Facebook as Eileen Gallagher. I'm on Instagram as Dr. Lady X.
I love Dr. Lady.
Well, because we were talking
picture
about
you in like a wheelchair though, with a shaved head. If you're Dr. Lady X, like the X-Men.
Funny. Maybe I should be Mrs. Doctor Strange. I'm just joking.
That's cool too. Flying around with a cool cape.
And then through the Final Percent, which I think a lot of your audience knows about the Final Percent. I'm Eileen at thefinalpercent.com. And you can send me an email through the Final Percent as well. And then if you want, I can give you my information. I don't know if it posts this, but I can give you my other contact info.
Oh, that's great. I think if you guys have trouble, reach out to me, because we're buddies. We'll definitely get you connected. So guys, thank you so much for leveling up your life today. I hope you have increased your vitality, understanding a little bit more today, and you go from that unconsciously incompetent and whatever it was that you were before this, and now you're a little more aware of what you need to work on, what you want to do. And we're here for you. Keep leveling up your life and have a blessed day. I'm going to hit this little bookends thing and we're out. Thanks so much, Eileen.
Yeah, of course. Have a great day, everybody.
You too. Awesome. Well, there you go. I think it just ended the live.